All right, here we go. Welcome in. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. I am Colin, joined today with my brother Kolby. Really excited for this episode as we are going to dive deep into the 2024 Iowa football recruiting class. I promise it's not going to be boring where we just go down the list and describe each guy. We're going to do fun superlatives and we're going to really hit on a lot of guys. We're also going to talk Kaleb Brown. We're going to do that first, and then we're going to get into recruiting. But talk Kaleb Brown and the unfortunate O-dub that he got over the weekend. We're going to get into that and just our thoughts there. And then Cade McNamara, the positive news of him being cleared to play and getting ready for fall camp. Because let's face it, I want a healthy Cade. I want to see a healthy Cade. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too. So yeah, I'm really excited for this episode. But before we begin, you can find Hawk Talk on Melrose on your favorite podcast app. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox. We used to be on Google Podcasts, but Google Podcasts is going away. So I guess if you listen to us on that, make sure you find us somewhere else. Our favorite platform is definitely YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you subscribe. And whatever podcast platform that you are listening to us on, including YouTube, make sure you like us, leave a review, do all those things. That's the best way for us to get out there. And we really appreciate that. So with that, what is going on, Kolby? How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Good to be back on the pod for my quarterly addition to the podcast. Can't believe we're already on almost the 4th of July. About 2 months from the date, we'll be walking into Kinnick. Well, you will be. I will be not. I will be waiting for the following week. But yeah, man, I can't believe we're getting closer and closer. I'm starting to feel the anticipation. I don't know if it's because of the release of NCAA football coming out that I'm just like in this like college football mode, like nonstop. That's all I've wanted to watch. I'm watching old YouTube videos of past Iowa games, man. I'm just at that point where I'm like, gosh, I'm ready. As soon as 4th of July is done, get me to football. I think we're 60 days away, or it was something like that from the first game.
Yeah, I think this
Less
Saturday.
than that now?
This Saturday, it's 63 days. We're recording this on Thursday, June 27th. So 63 days, 9 weeks away, which is just crazy. We're in the single digits.
That's from the first Iowa game, though, right?
Like yeah, that's the first Iowa game. We're 8 weeks away from just college football starting in general.
Week 0.
Yeah. So
hallelujah.
So let's first talk Kaleb Brown and the news that came out over the weekend of him getting an O-dub. Man, I just look at O-dubs and I just think it's completely avoidable, especially in today's day and age with Lyft, with Uber, with other means to get home. And unfortunately, it happened though. But I will say this, fortunately, no one got hurt. Kaleb didn't get hurt and no one around him got hurt because that's a problem with O-dubs. You're endangering the lives of not only yourself, but the people around you. And that's why it's such a serious matter. So when you look at this situation and you ask, okay, so what's he going to get? I would imagine he's going to get a 1-game suspension because you look back in recent memory, and unfortunately, this isn't the first rodeo. We've had our fair share of guys that have gotten one, which just sucks to see because, like I said, it's completely avoidable. But we had Jamari Harris a couple of years ago. We had Emir Smith-Marset back in 2020. We had Tristan Wirfs in 2018, and they all got 1-game suspension. So I would imagine Kaleb will get 1 game. I think if he gets any more than 1 game, then there must have been something behind the scenes that we didn't know about. Like, was he already in the doghouse? Did he already do maybe something that was lesser than what an O-dub is, but he was right on that edge of, hey, you mess up another time, you're going to have to pay for it. And, it's going to be more than 1 game. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think it's kind of surprising that Kirk hasn't came out with a statement talking about it. Kaleb hasn't came out yet either. So, and it's been about a week now. We're recording this. Well, I guess, 4 or 5 days, but by the time this episode comes out, it'll be about a week. And so that's kind of strange to me, but I think at the end of the day, it's like, hopefully he learned his lesson and we can move on from this. And hopefully, this doesn't happen again, because like I said, it shouldn't happen. And with Kaleb, he's 20, it's no excuse, but sometimes, you make mistakes and hopefully you learn from it. And hopefully it's something where Kaleb looks back on, it's like, yeah, that was dumb. I'm never doing that again. And, he pays his, the consequences of doing it, and we move on. And like I said, just thank God no one got hurt. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I think when we heard the news, I think that was one of my first texts is, it's disappointing. Obviously, this day and age, and it's been this way for the past 10 years now, is that there's really no excuse, especially for college football players, to be driving around drunk. And potentially taking someone's life for something that can easily be avoided, like you had said. So getting past that, it happened. I think, like you said, it really depends on, what's it like inside the locker room. Has he done stuff before that has betrayed the coach's trust? Has he done stuff that put him in the doghouse? You think back to last year. He had a game that he didn't dress for. He was a healthy scratch. No one really knew why. So, I think the hope is it's one game, follow the precedent. But like you said, if it's something else, then that there's something else going on. So all I know is I hope that he gets it taken care of. I hope that it makes him a better person because of it, that he rights his wrongs. And, he's a great player. Well, he has great potential. I wouldn't say he's a great player yet, but he was obviously our number one receiver going into the year. And now guys are just going to have to step up. And obviously, I think we were talking about this. Yes, I get it's Illinois State, and I know that we'll probably not have to – the need for him won't be that great. But we're at a point with our offense right now, man, with Tim Lester coming in and installing a brand new thing, is we need to be having as much time together as we can. And so – any of that missed opportunity is big time. So especially Cade coming off an injury. And, last year, Cade really didn't even get that much time with him because by the time Cade went down, Caleb wasn't even to the point where he was getting snaps yet. So that's just unfortunate. Your hope is the Jarrett Buies of the world, and those guys step up to fill the void for the first game. But disappointing. And I hated reading that Monday morning.
Well, you go off the weekend, and Sunday was such a positive day. You got the 2 commits after the big recruiting weekend. There was more down the pipeline that was going to happen, in the next couple of days. And then Cade McNamara coming out and saying that he is full on ready to go, clear to play. Not only that, but he participated in that softball thing with Iowa State. And which I think is a really cool thing that they do, by the way, the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I think that's really sweet that they do that. But he played in that. And then it sounds like I was listening to 2 guys named Chris, and the guy was saying that he was at the thing, and he said like Cade looked great. Like he was moving around really good. So that's really good to hear. So you had all those positives. And then of course you wake up Monday morning and then you see the Kaleb Brown news, and that's like, cool.
Yeah.
We just can't have nice things as an Iowa football fan.
It does feel like we're like at a yearly, I don't get it, but a yearly OWI type thing from one of the players. I guess hopefully got that out of the way and it doesn't happen again. And, I texted Austin Trashman about this. Like, I remember back in high school when playing high school ball, when one of us got in trouble, the whole team got in trouble and it pissed everyone off. I think that's kind of your hope in this situation where the team kind of rallies a bit and is like, guys, we got to be buttoned up. No more of this nonsense. Like we're getting closer and closer to the season where we actually have an opportunity to go to the playoff. And I'm not trying to be a homer about this, but like if there was ever a year for Iowa to get to the playoff, it's this year. And so there needs to be a mindset going into this season of like, hey, we need to be as buttoned up, as disciplined, hold each other accountable. And I think that's your hope coming out of this.
Yep, spot on. So let's get into Cade McNamara real quick then with the news over the weekend that he is ready to go, cleared to play, and just very exciting news because, I'm pumped for Cade, man. Like I want a fully healthy Cade McNamara 1 year. It's his last year at Iowa, and let's face it, last year just really sucked because we never saw the true capability of what he can do being hurt. After that Kids Day scrimmage, he was never the same. He was 60, 70%, I would say, if that maybe. I don't even know. He was definitely playing it off. The coaches were playing it off, but, he wanted to play. I mean, that's just the thing with Cade. Like last year, if he never got hurt against Michigan State, he would have played the rest of the year, and every single game, he would have been like what we saw in the first 5 games. I don't think that injury was ever just going to heal magically. I think it was just always going to affect him throughout the year. So now he's 100%. Or probably very close to 100%. And as we enter fall camp and as we enter, the early stages of the season, hopefully he can stay healthy because I want to see a healthy Cade McNamara. Yes, was it nice getting Brendan Sullivan? Of course it was, right? But at the end of the day, I still want Cade to be QB1. I think most people would agree with me. And I just, like I said, my hope is that he can stay healthy, because he just, what he has done, just, you could tell he loves being a Hawk. And it really sucks that, last year, the way it went down, he deserves one final great year at Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be foolish not to say that. Like, if Cade's healthy, that guy should be our starter. I mean, he led Michigan to, I mean, everyone knows this. Like, this guy is not just some slouch. I think that, our hope is that he can come in. Obviously, things change when you get pads on. My hope is that he's still very protected while being able to go full and learning this offense. Because I just remember last year when we got the news that he went down on Kids Day, and it just, like, everyone, like, held their breath. And it was like this week after week thing of, like, what is going on? Now, the silver lining here is we don't have a backup named Deacon Hill this year. That's I think we can be a little more, all right, let's see how this thing's going. Let's go. Instead of trying to, like, no, like, if Cade goes down, we're in big trouble. I don't think that this year, but at the end of the day, Cade is a leader. Cade is our guy. He's a good player. He's a good football player. He's proven that. And so a healthy Cade all year means good things for Iowa. I truly think that. I think he's the type of quarterback that can run Lester's system pretty well. So I think, like you said, great news. Love seeing him move around. Hopefully when the pads come on, he's doing it just as well.
I would say if you could only say one thing, like, okay, this is why I wish we had Brendan Sullivan out there, it's probably the running aspect of it. And I will agree with that. But even that, though, it's like,
I wouldn't say, Cade at Michigan wasn't not mobile. He didn't run all the time, but he could still move around. And I think that's our hope for this year. Last year, with that quad injury, I mean, he could barely move.
We didn't even do QB sneaks with him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need a guy that is running crazy. I just want something that can move in the pocket. And we haven't had that in, seems like 1,000 years. So
since CJ Beathard.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I mean, Stanley could do it a little bit, but not great.
No, he wasn't. No, but yeah, with Brendan, though, it's just nice knowing that, like, we will probably have him come next year. And the quarterback room, man, like, it's a crazy how, like, 2 months can change. 2 months ago, it was just looking really, really bad. And then now, 2 months later, we're feeling really good about it. You got hopefully a healthy Cade, Brendan Sullivan, Marco, he's still developing. James Lazar coming in, which we'll discuss here in the 2024 recruiting. And then we got Jackson Stratford from Colorado State, which, as a walk-on, I'm okay with it as a walk-on. As long as he's not on scholarship, it is what it is. And his stats were not great at Colorado State. So I'm not trying to say that this guy's good or anything, but it's just another guy in the quarterback room that's going to help in the scout team and things like that.
And real quick, Lester's at a point trying to build this room with guys that he feels like can run his system. Doesn't mean like that guy's ever going to play, but hey, let's have 4 or 5 guys in there that one can run a scout team. Doesn't have to be great. I mean, Deacon Hill should have been a scout team guy at the end of the day. Like that's, and so, I think we're at a very healthy spot moving forward with Lester running the show at quarterbacks. I'm excited about James. I'm cautiously optimistic about James. Let me phrase that. I'm more excited about Jimmy Sullivan for next year. And the Fitzgerald kid that is walking on, who I think has a chance to actually be a starter for Iowa someday. So that's a different combo for a different day. But I think we're going to see a big improvement this year from, within 7 to 8 months, seeing how a quarterback room should be handled. Getting a guy like Lester in there is going to make a big difference. So I'm bullish on that.
Well, I was just saying, and actually having a former quarterback be coaching the quarterbacks, I think is just going to help, not having Brian Ferentz coaching them. But yeah, let's get into the 2024 recruiting class deep dive here. So instead of it making, it boring and we just go through each guy, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we just have some different questions, different things like most underrated player, things like that. And we're going to try to touch on a lot of guys while we're doing this. And then towards the end, there might be a few guys that we don't mention that we might just bring up their names, just like, here, this is this guy. We didn't mention about this guy, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to start with then the first one, and I'll let you go first. The 2024 class MVP going into Iowa. And what I mean by that, it's not like the best player, because that's really hard to decide, okay, who's the best player in this class, because everybody's coming from different backgrounds. What I'm talking about is if like we only pick one guy. Let's say we were max on scholarships in the 2024 class. We could only bring one guy in, which is obviously very unrealistic. But let's just say that was the case. What is one guy that you are glad that we got?
I mean, this one's easy for me, and I think he's going to end up being the crown jewel of the class. It's Gavin Huffman. I think you've look at our tight end production the last how many years? We haven't had a 4-star, I think, since Ray Hamilton in 2011.
Which is just crazy to think, by the way.
Crazy to think, and seeing that development, and not that stars matter all that much, but getting a kid like Gavin that, when you look at this kid's frame, you look at his athletic ability, like he's kind of the total package. He had offers from the likes of LSU. Some of the other bigger schools? I know that
there was like 3 or 4 big schools that were trying to get him.
And to have this kid come in early at semester and already get a whole grasp of the playbook, I wouldn't be surprised if by the year end he's the 3rd tight end behind Lachey and Addison Estrenga. I was just gonna say he's my MVP of the class. I think it was a great class overall, but I think he's the crown jewel.
So I'm gonna kind of go off the wall here with my pick, and I'm gonna say Jalen Watson. I'm really excited for this guy because you look at his background. He was a guy that was really playing wide receiver all high school. And then he comes into Iowa and would have been like last summer, and he played corner. Phil Parker must have saw something in him, offers him right after. And then last year, his senior year, plays both sides, receiver and corner. So really only 1 year playing corner, and he gives up 1 ball the entire year at corner. And that was his first year playing corner. What does that tell you? Like, that tells you that guy has a lot of potential. And once again, when Phil sees something in a guy, chances are that guy's probably going to be good at some point. And you look at his recruiting, everybody was trying to get him to play wide receiver. So his offers from like Cincinnati, West Virginia, Maryland, they were all trying to get him to play wide receiver. Iowa was the only school that really offered him to play on the defense side of the ball. And for a lot of people, they're probably thinking, well, why the hell would we want him on the defense side of the ball when we need all the help at wide receiver? But it's because we have another guy very similar to him in KJ Parker that's coming in, which we'll talk about. But yeah.
Who actually played defense a lot in high school. We'll get to that. But yeah.
Yeah. So no, I'm really excited for Jalen Watson. I think he's going to be a stud. And I think he's going to be really good for Iowa.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's an underrated prospect. Anytime Phil Parker decides to take a chance on a kid, I feel pretty good about it. The track record makes you feel pretty good about it. I think he's got a lot of athletic ability. I don't know if he'll necessarily come in right away and play, but maybe he's one of those guys.
I think he'll be a development.
But there's always one of those corners that seems to be one of those defensive backs that always pops up. Last year was John Nestor. Like, I think it's definitely possible. Jamari Harris was one of those guys as a true freshman. So I think that's a good pick. I think he's probably one of the more underrated guys in the class that has a chance to do really good things at Iowa.
All right, the next one is the most underrated player coming in.
I think it's 2 in-state guys. Cody Fox, who committed to Iowa really, really, really early on. He would have been a national recruit had he not committed to Iowa right away and closed things down. This kid's a big kid, athletic kid. Notre Dame was in on this kid. I think he has a chance to be a great lineman at Iowa. I think, there's a lot of potential there. And then Derek Weisskopf. He had offers from Kansas State, Nebraska, Wisconsin, all those Big Ten teams and Big 12 teams that, really saw a lot in this kid. I think he's very underrated. He's an athletic linebacker, rangy. And so I think he's not getting a lot of love because also he committed right away and closed things down. But I think he can come in and play special teams right away and do some good things. And also, naturally, players from Iowa outside the Caden Proctors of the world, like, they're going to be under-recruited because the talent level that they're playing in the State's not as good as compared to the Floridas and Texas of the world. But you look at some of these kids and how they test, and I think they have a chance to do good things.
Cody Fox, to me, I was watching his highlights, and God, he is just an aggressive, very physical lineman. I'm really pumped for him. So I'm going to go with Rashad Godfrey. I really like what I see in him. Watching his highlights, he's 6'2", so he has really good size. He has good hands. And think about the experience playing down in Florida against the Florida talent. That is something that sometimes people may forget about, but Florida is just filled with talent. And so when you think of this class, you think of guys like Jalen Watson, you think guys like Derek Weizkoff, KJ Parker, Brevin Dahl, James Rosario, you go down the list, you kind of forget about Godfrey. And I think he can be really good for us down the road.
I think he's a great pick. I'm trying to go back. I remember he late in the game, right? There were some Florida schools poking around late in the game. Maybe it was Florida State, and he decided to stick with Iowa. But yeah, I mean, he's another one of those kids that had offers from the Kansas States of the world, and Iowa was able to snag him. So I think that's a good pick.
Player that will see the field first, obviously outside of punter, because Dakin's going to play right away. Outside of him, who are you going to give?
I think it's Gavin Huffman. I think he has a chance to see the field, be that third tight end, excuse me. And then one of the skill guys, whether it's Vander Zee, KJ Parker, or Brevin Dahl. I'm very intrigued to see what Brevin does. I think he could be a kick returner right away. And depending on how he looks going into fall camp in Lester's system, being a player that could be a change of pace guy because of he's got legit speed.
So yeah, for me, I had the easy answer, Gavin Huffman for sure. I mean, he comes in early, he's an early enrollee, like he's going to know the offense. Like hell, he could maybe see the field a little bit this year. But if I'm going to go just kind of shoot for the stars here, yeah, Brevin Dahl or KJ Parker, because with Brevin Dahl, I mean, for how fast he is, certain situations, right? You could do a speed out with him. You could do any sort of like jet motion with him because of his lightning speed. And so, yeah, I could see like one or two times, or hell, even on special teams, maybe. And then you look at like a guy like KJ Parker, our wide receiver room, very thin. All it takes is a few injuries. And we might need a guy like that to step up and play a little bit here or there. So I could see, maybe him getting a few snaps. But the wide receivers, to me, like you look back in recent history, it's very, very rare do we see freshmen step up and play. Really, the last one that I can really remember is like Emir Smith-Marset, 2017. I'm sure there's probably others, but that's one that I can really remember who played like literally right away. He played in the Iowa State game, second game of the season, and had the game-winning overtime touchdown. So anything is possible. But yeah, I'm going to say probably Gavin Huffman, though, for sure, for that one. Player that will really stand out year 2 or year 3. So a guy that, it's going to just take time developing, but by year 2 or 3, wow, watch out. That guy's gonna, they're gonna be in there, and you're gonna start being like, wow, this guy's gonna be the makings of the next NFL draft pick.
I mean, I think it's gonna be Joseph Anderson. I think we've seen this in the past month. The athletic profile that this kid has is off the charts, like legit testing, like in those upper percentiles. And the kid just needs to add weight and needs to get developed in the Iowa weight room. But I think by year 3, you could look at this kid as like a edge rusher and be like, wow, he's got a chance to do great things. So Joseph Anderson's my pick. After watching the videos of him sprinting and doing hurdles, it's like, wow, this kid's got a great athletic makeup. Now it just needs to be put together.
For me, it's any of the linebackers. I know that's an easy like answer, or maybe like, pick one, but all 3 linebackers, man, like I could see at some point being really good for us. You start with the guy that you were just mentioning, Derek Weizkoff, and then Cam Buffington and Preston Reeves. They're all just very athletic. And like you mentioned, they come from like small town Iowa. They were going to Iowa from the very beginning. It's probably been way higher than what they are. But watching all 3 guys, like Preston Reeves, for example, he set the record. What was it here? I think I actually wrote it down. The high school record for combined pass and rushing yards while leading the team in tackles and tackles for loss. Then you had, Buffington, who played eight-man football, but was very athletic. Weizkoff played multiple positions, quarterback, wide receiver, safety. So the problem, though, is that our linebacker room is stacked, especially this year. But then even going into next year, you got some guys right below Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson. But man, like give it a couple years and these guys, at least think of would say, or what were you gonna say?
Think of a guy like Cam Buffington, who comes from eight-man football. Think of you compare him to a guy like Nate Meyer, who Cam Buffington, as far as athletic ability goes, is a lot better than Nate. But it's that adjustment period from 8-man to 11-man football. But I think, man, this kid athletically is already there. It's trying to put together those pieces to play big time college football. But man, like you said, all three are intriguing prospects.
Most intrigued position group from this class.
I think honestly, like I grouped them together, but I think the offensive skill positions, I think there's some legit potential in all of those positions. I think Xavier Williams tends to kind of be forgotten about. We'll see. I think for me, I'm always hesitant when you take a giant running back and bring him in. I think of like a Torrin Young, but I think he's someone that maybe I'm underestimating a little bit. I definitely underestimate Reese Vanderzee. He was a highly recruited kid in the Midwest who is a very athletic kid. But like if he can come in and end up being like an Ed Hinkle or like a Nick, someone like that, like that's a great possession receiver, but he's athletic
Matt
too.
Vandenberg.
Like that Matt Vandenberg, like I think he's underrated. So I'm excited to see what our skill positions do between the Gavin Huffmans, the KJ Parkers, the Brevin Doles, and seeing what they can bring to a Tim Lester-led offense that hopefully features those guys a little more.
What I like about Reese Vanderzee, two things. Number one, 6'5", he would fit in for that X position that we desperately need, but it probably won't be this year, probably a year or two from now. But then the second reason why I like him is because you had a school like Iowa State, and I know Iowa State, but the one thing Iowa State that's done way better than us is developing wide receivers, finding wide receiver talent. And let's face it, I mean, they've actually had some good wide receivers. And so when you have a school like Iowa State who really wanted this guy, that tells you something. That tells you that they see something in Reese Vanderzee. And so for him to choose Iowa over Iowa State with those things being a factor where it's like Iowa's been a joke at that position, Iowa State's actually been pretty decent at it. It's a pretty big deal. And with like KJ Parker, watching his highlights and you put the ball in his hands, good things happen. He's a speedster. He looks like he's going to be a guy that's going to be really good for us. And to be completely honest with you, I don't know how we got him. I really don't. He went to a pristine high school, so it wasn't like he was going up against just really bad players. Like it was a pristine high school in the Chicagoland. That was a massive gift for us. And like I said, go back and watch his highlights, and I think most people will agree with me on that one. For me, which one were we on again? Oh, the position group. So for me, it's a defensive line, man. Like you look at the defensive line, and you mentioned Joseph Anderson, just very, very quick off the ball. Now, yes, does he have to add weight? Of course he does. He's 220 right now. I think maybe not even 220. So the chances of him maybe seeing the field this year, he might have to gain a few pounds. But hey, maybe on third down, you might see him. But then you have a guy like Chima Chineke. Is that how you pronounce his last name? From Texas. I think that's
Chineke. Yeah,
Chineke. Tremendous length for him as well. He could probably play either edge or interior for him. He's a little bit more bigger than Joseph. I mean, both guys have to put on pounds. There's just, one's 220, the other one's 240. And then you got Drew Campbell, which is Jack Campbell's younger brother. So if he can be anything like Jack, that's a good thing. For him, though, it's going to be a lot of development for him. But I'm really excited for him as well. I think there is obviously potential there. And then Devin Kennedy, guy from Arizona. He was a late bloomer, started playing football junior year, and he was okay junior year, but then he really took that next step senior year. He's one of those guys where I feel like if he played football his entire life, he would be way higher ranked, and we probably wouldn't have gotten him. So I'm really excited for him. That's another guy though that, like I said, has to put in the time. It's gonna be a developmental type of thing, but give it a couple of years, and I think he's gonna be pretty good. And going back to Drew Campbell for a second too, he kind of reminds me of like an Easton Herkett, right? So you don't really think much of him, and it's kind of like, yeah. But then like 2 years from now, it's like, okay, yeah, we have something to him. Because I'm sure we probably thought that with Ethan Herkett, like, who's this guy? Like, this guy's never going to see the field. And look, and now he's starting for Iowa, and he's actually pretty good. So there's always those type of players for Iowa where I feel like that always happens. All right. Next one, player that will benefit from Iowa's development.
Yeah, I took a couple here. I think, like I had alluded to earlier, Cam Buffington. I think he's a guy that comes from eight-man football, going to need to develop at Iowa, but I think he gets in that weight room. I think he's someone that can make a difference here in year 3 and 4. And then the two linemen, Devin Kennedy and Joseph Anderson, great athletic ability. Haven't been playing football. Well, Joseph Anderson, but Kennedy has not been playing football long, like you had said. Getting them in there and really learning the Iowa way, I think is going to be very beneficial for them. So those are my three, all defensive players.
Yep, I went with Devin Kennedy as well, just because of that late bloomer. Like there's still a lot of things that he's gonna have to learn and get better at. But I think give it some time, and he might be a guy that you're gonna see out on that field and might be pretty good for us. So, and then the last one, we'll leave it at this one. Then the first player taken in the NFL draft.
Easy for me, Gavin Huffman. He was my crown jewel of this class. I think he could be the next. Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say the next tight end taken, because Luke Lachey is going to take that, and I think Addison will eventually get there. But I think Gavin is going to be the next high draft pick for Iowa down the road.
I'm going to go with Joseph Anderson. I really, really like this guy. There was Kansas State, Nebraska. I mean, they really wanted this guy. If he can just add the weight, he's going to be really good. But I'm just going to go with that to be fun, because I do think he has a lot of potential, and I think he's going to be really good for Iowa in a few years. So, and he's a guy, like I said, where maybe even this year, if he adds maybe a little bit of weight before the football season starts, you might see him out there on third downs ever so often to just, you know, for a pass rushing situation. So you never know. I guess we kind of pretty much hit on everybody, I think, besides maybe a few. James Lazar, obviously quarterback. We didn't really talk much about it. Oh yeah, I guess we talked about him a little bit, but not a whole lot of it. I guess when we were talking about Cade, you brought up James Lazar, but I think for me, what I like about him is he can run the football, and I think he would fit into Tim Lester's offense pretty good. Needs to be a little bit better of an accurate thrower, but coming from Florida, very, very surprising that he even looked at Iowa, because this was when Brian Ferentz was still here that he committed. So, but like I said, with him, I agree with you. I think I'm a little bit more excited for Jimmy Sullivan than Razar, but that doesn't mean that I'm not, though, excited for him, because I do like his speed. And then
I think his speed's intriguing. I am worried, like you said, about his accuracy, and being a guy that you can count on. I think Iowa's moving forward. I think being accurate is going to be a very big part of this offense. Yeah. So. And it hasn't been the last how many years. I don't know the last time we've been above 60%. It might have been CJ Beathard. And so historically, not having an accurate arm has not led to good things for Iowa. So,
yep. Was there anybody else that we were missing off this list that I can think of?
I mean, I think Michael Burt, he was a guy that we,
about him.
Don't really talk about because of Gavin Huffman. I think that he's probably a year 3 or 4 guy as well that's going to have to sit and learn and watch other guys and hopefully not get passed up. And then, I think the offensive line, I do think this is an offensive line that got recruited very well. A lot of underrated guys, but you have Will Nolan, who is another 4-star, big guy, 6'6", 275, played in Illinois, and moves extremely well. So, I think all in all, we didn't get to Rise Dakin. He's another one. He's going to play right away. But all in all, this class for me is a very impressive class. It is a lot of high potential guys, with also guys that, hey, if they develop, could turn into all Big Ten type players. So This was to me, this was an upper, above average class that Kirk Ferentz usually brings in, because we did have some of those star rankings, like you said. According to 24/7, we got 6 4-stars. That's a great class for Iowa. So a lot to be seen, a lot to like, but I'm excited for it. I think there's guys that can come in and play early, and there's going to be 10 guys that need to be developed. So,
yeah, you don't really see it very often where the composite ranking 32nd. That's really good for a developmental school. So if you get that on a consistent basis, it's really good, because for a while there, we were kind of averaging 45, 50-ish. You'd have to probably go way back to when we were maybe even below that a little bit. So to be in the upper half, or the upper, essentially the upper third of recruiting ranking. And then if you look at like the Big Ten, being somewhere kind of in the middle, maybe a little bit above the middle, that's really good for, once again, a developmental school. Because for Iowa, the thing is this is how we do it. Like, we find guys that are borderline 4 stars, right? They're upper 3 stars, but they're not quite getting the praise or the recognition. And so these bigger schools aren't really looking at them, and that's who we snag up, and they end up being studs for us after a few years of just being in Iowa and developing. And that's how we kind of always find some jewels in every single class. It's like clockwork. Every single class, we always have a few that just turn out to be studs for us. And it's usually the guys where, like, the guys that are like not ranked at all that end up being really good for us. So, well, that is it for the recruiting 2024 recruiting class. I think we did a good job of just kind of breaking it down, player by player, but kind of doing it more in kind of a fun way instead of just going down the list. So before we end, though, this very short and sweet, you can talk about it because you're a little bit more when it comes to recruiting than I am. But the 2025 recruiting class, we had the big recruiting weekend last weekend. The hope was to get some guys, and we certainly did that. Started with Mason Woods, last week committing, and then we get 4 more. So what are your thoughts there?
I think we're just at a day and age where things are going to take time, especially now with the transfer portal. Things and needs change. I think Iowa's going after the guys that they want. Yeah. And I think this class will look a hell of a lot different if we end up landing Osei and the guys like Christian Hudson and Terrence Smith. Like, according to 24/7 right now, if we landed those guys, we'd have a top 23 class. So, I do think we need to land those guys. I think they're of the utmost importance. And so I think we ultimately went out there. But so far, this class is shaping up to be another class that has a lot of potential, that has been on the upswing for the last 4 or 5 years under Ferentz. So I think there's a lot to like. I think the hope is, though, that we close out this class with some of these guys that are big time once.
And at the end of the day, this class was going to be smaller anyways. It's just a smaller recruiting class for Iowa. And so that's not really the issue at all there too. So even if we end up landing, I would say probably the magic number. I mean, right now we're at 12, and the hope is like, maybe land a few more before the season, kind of get in the mid-teens, 15, 16, and then maybe a few more this fall and into, obviously, once you get into December, the signing period and stuff like that. But it's going to be a smaller class regardless. Like, I could see it finishing at maybe 18-ish guys. Last year was 24. So, but that's not, like I said, that's not a problem at all, especially with the transfer portal now. So, yeah, it's shaping up to be a decent class. I'll admit, I was a little concerned last week before we got this was before we got Mason Woods, and we were at like 7 guys, and it was kind of like one of those things where it was like, okay, hopefully and I knew the recruiting weekend was coming up, and that was obviously going to be big for Iowa, similar to last year. We got a lot of guys after that. So, and it turned out to be that case. So yeah, I hope we can get Terrence Smith, Epinenza, and Hudson. That'd be huge for Iowa. All right. We will end it there. Thank you guys all for listening. We'll be back shortly. I think I'm going to do, just for something fun around the 4th of July, my top 10 favorite games inside Kinnick. So I'm probably going to have that one out, and then we're going to get into maybe more in the middle of July. We'll start talking Big Ten football and just kind of go through kind of like a Big Ten preview. And then by then, man, it is fall camp right around the corner, Big Ten Media Days. And we'll be,
hopefully we're not reporting on people being injured like that. So
that is the goal. Injured or getting suspended or whatever the case may be, right?
Just curious, when did you start going to games in Iowa? Was it 2006, 7, 8?
2007, 2008 full year. 2007, I remember going to like 1 or 2. So I don't really have like, for like some people where like, they've been going to games since late 90s or early 2000s, or maybe even prior to that. Like for me, it's kind of 2008 and now. So, but there's been some good games in between those times, some really good games. So I'm really excited to do that episode.
Do you remember your first ever game? Who did they play?
Like I said, it was 2007, I think. Maybe it was 2006. Maybe I went to a game in 2006. I don't remember going to games like full time 2008, but I do remember going to a few prior to that.
First game, 2002, Iowa versus Akron. We'll never
that was
forget
your first.
it.
That was your first game.
Yep.
Yeah,
first
I don't
game.
know.
Second game, Iowa, Michigan, 2003. I just watched that game on YouTube last night. What a game.
I want to say it, and I think I went to a game prior to this, but I remember being at, which we lost, 2007 Iowa Western Michigan, like the last game of the season. I remember being at that game.
Surprised you're still a fan.
But I do remember going to a game prior to that. I just don't remember who. And then, yeah, 2008, I went to every single. I remember, like the Wisconsin game with Sean Green, the Penn State game where we tried getting Trash Man to go with us, and he was too busy. I can't wait till he listens to this episode, and he's just gonna laugh his ass off. But yeah, you got to
always busy.
Yep, not experience one of the greatest games, and the rush in the field. And I remember you taking the piece of grass home with you. So that's a memory that's always gonna live. And walking right past Joe Paul, seeing him all sad after that loss. Yeah, it was great. And like I said, for me, I was 11 years old at that point. Yeah. So, yeah, crazy. But yeah, I'm excited to do that list because, like I said, there's been some really good games from 2008 to current. So I'm excited to do that one. But, well, that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening. Have a good rest of your week, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.